Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 15. Today is your third summative day. The project assignment sheet's been posted for a couple days, and I haven't heard any questions coming in aside from a couple of people who've requested extra time because they're still learning the ropes with video editing. And by the end of today or this weekend, however long it takes you to do this project, you'll be about halfway through the course. At this point, I would like to say that I'm proud of everybody who is still with me. We started out with 35 students. We have significantly fewer now because not everybody took it seriously. Those of you who remain, you're definitely making me proud with the contributions that you add to the discussions and the depth of thought that I'm seeing in your written work. It's great. It really is great, and it makes me happy to look over your work when I know it's going to be smart and it's going to be witty. So I'm proud of you, and kudos, and keep up the good work, right? So what I want to do in this video is just tie up a few loose ends as far as Lear goes, because it's going to feature in the final exam, and I feel that I've given you a lot of opportunities to look for the themes, but I think I should probably go over a few things as well. So let me start with the first theme, the one that has to do with hubris. Being blind to obvious truths. Well, this happens quite a bit in the play. I mean, it starts off very clearly, Lear being blinded by his own pride and this sort of inflated sense of self. He boots Cordelia out of the country, and then he does the same for Kent. And meanwhile, these two awful people are standing in front of him, inheriting the kingdom. Okay. That's a nice obvious one. But where else does this theme get reinforced? Because the thing about a theme is we should see it coming up in a multitude of ways and all throughout the piece, whatever it is, if it's a poem or a play or a novel. Well, let's follow Lear and see more of his blindness. So the exchange between himself and Goneril in Act 1, Scene 4 is a pretty good example. When he blows his top at the fact that Goneril has mistreated him and his knights, I wonder, how did he not see this coming? How is it that he knows his daughter so poorly that he didn't know that this was really the type of person that she was? Well, he must have just been absolutely blind to Goneril the whole time she was growing up. It's not as if she just became, this bad at this point in her life. If she's a real, dynamic, realistic character, this is Goneril. And if you're a caring father, you probably should have noticed by now. You probably should have figured out what kind of person your child really is. And he curses her. He calls upon the gods to make her sterile so that she'll never have kids, so that she'll never know what it's like to be betrayed by her kids. You have to kind of think he's surprised. The amount of the explosion, I think, is equal to the amount of surprise. If he had any sense that she was like this, he wouldn't have exploded to the extent that he does. When you have a sense of, a kid is bad or a person is bad and then they betray you, I think that it would be more of a seething sort of anger, that slow burn that then sort of boils over. But this was like a volcano, which is boom. And he really lets her have it. I think that really shows that he must have been, for all intents and purposes, an absentee parent for these kids when they were growing up. I think maybe he doted on Cordelia. We know that Cordelia was his favorite, and I think that maybe he just completely doted on her, oblivious to the fact that Goneril and Regan were there, and maybe like becoming resentful and becoming hateful, and Lear has absolutely no idea this is going on. So when Goneril mistreats him, it's this explosion of like surprise, but think about it from like anybody else's point of view, from like Ken's point of view or Cordelia's point of view. They would have been like, completely like facepalm, like, of course that happened, right? And so then he's like, well, I'm going to Regan's house. Again, completely oblivious to the fact that Regan is actually worse. We know that she's worse because her equivocation was worse than Goneril's. She outdid Goneril when Lear's like, tell me how much you love me. She said some ridiculous things like, I make myself an enemy to everything that is not you. That's how much love I've got. So off he goes, and the whole time the fool is making fun of him. The fool is, I don't know, I think an awesome character. I really do. The fool's a great character. And because the idea of foolishness is tied up together with this blindness, right? And so the question, that you could ask is, who's the real fool? We got, two guys in the room, and one of them is a fool. Which one is it? Is it the guy wearing, the jester's coxcomb, or is it this, foolish old king? Well, it's the foolish old king. There's, I love in the exchange, I guess it's Act 2, Scene 4. Is it 2-4 when Ken is in the stocks, and he's alone for a moment with the fool, and the fool says something to him. And Ken's like, "Where'd you learn that?" He's like, "Where'd you learn that, fool?" He's like, "Not in the stocks, fool." We get this real sense that the fool is actually a pretty astute guy. The fool is, as far as like being character goes, he would be somebody who probably should have died by this point in his life. He's probably really a runt. He's probably deformed. He wouldn't be able to work for a living. That's kind of like, who the jesters were at that time. But he was smart enough and witty enough that he, earns Lear's, not his admiration, but, Lear sort of like gets a kick out of him. He's a witty guy. He can come up with rhymes. He can come up with jokes. He can tread that fine line between, I can say things that could get me into trouble, but I just don't quite, I'm not quite blunt enough to get Lear really angry enough to like, execute him or whatever, right? The fool is he's a foil in a sense for Lear. He's like the opposite of Lear. Whereas Lear is like this really proud guy, the fool is a really humble guy. And whereas Lear is foolish, the fool is actually wise. It's a great piece of irony to have this character here, and he reinforces the theme because there are many times when the fool points out the fact that Lear is being foolish. Moving along to the Gloucester subplot. There's some obvious blindness going on here on both the literal and the figurative level. Obviously, Gloucester is blind to the fact that Edgar is not to be trusted, and how quickly he turns on his son, like this good son. And Edgar is a good boy as far as we know. He's a great character in this story. He never does anything that's really wrong aside from the fact that he lies about who he is so he doesn't get executed. And he defends his father, and at the end of the play he's like the one good character who's left. How does Gloucester turn on him so quickly? But he does, and he's blind. The part where he confides in Edmund with like, I've got this secret letter that could get me in a lot of trouble, but let me tell you all about it and also where I'm hiding it. And now I'm off to go help Lear, which I'm not supposed to do, so don't tell anybody. And there goes Edmund. Gloucester, that subplot is thick with blindness, and then when he becomes literally blind, but think about what has blinded him. His arrogance has literally blinded him. It is such an arrogant thing to have a child the way that Gloucester did. I've got a maid. She works for me. She's a vulnerable member of society. Yeah, I'm going to take advantage of her. She had a kid, and yeah, he's my kid, but I'm just going to like brush him off and stuff. Gloucester really is, it's weird. He's kind of a good guy deep down. He tries to save Lear, but he's an arrogant man. His wealth and power have obviously gone to his head. And Edmund is the personification of his hubris. It's like, this child is the product of your arrogance, and it is he who has caused you to become blind. There's some great irony in that part of the play as well. Moving along even farther towards the end of, as Lear becomes mad, when he goes insane, very clearly, he no longer sees reality. You can add that dimension into it as well. Madness appears throughout it's a motif that is, basically all of Act 3 is just this madness motif that we see, the crazy things that go on, the storm that rages, and Lear losing his wits, and all of these characters surrounding him see what he doesn't see. And the episode where he puts his daughters on trial, that's a good reinforcer of this theme as well. As a madman, he sees what he didn't see when he was sane. There's some irony in there as well. It's a nice reversal of what you would think a king should be able to see. Anyways, that's the most important theme in this play, this idea of blindness leading to a person's downfall, and hubris being the cause of that blindness. As far as good people, your goodness, your righteousness not sheltering you, I mean, Edgar is the personification of that for sure. Hopefully you picked up on that. That this is a guy who just minding his own business. He's a very good man who was totally blindsided by a very bad man. It didn't matter how good Edgar was. That totally, on the day where his father gets manipulated and starts persecuting him, it didn't matter how good he was. He could have been great, he could have been terrible. He got the exact same thing. Cordelia as well. Obviously, Cordelia is, she's almost beyond good. She's the virgin archetype. She's just purity and sincerity and goodness personified. And when Lear carries her dead body onto the stage, it's so painfully clear that, in this world, because of the way that people really are, some people, not all of us, but some people are just really awful people. This is the thing about life. We share the world with Edmunds and Gonerills and Regans. People who are willing to poison each other to get what they want, which is what we see happening later on in the play. It's truly awful, but that is the way that life is. And so the idea that Shakespeare's themes are timeless, the fact that these ideas are as true now as they were then, even though it's sad, but it's true, and that's what gives the idea of value. So hopefully you understand those themes, and hopefully you're able to see them popping up all throughout the play. At this point, I'm just going to pass things over to you. Let me know if you have any issues or need any help with your project, and other than that, I'll be expecting to see those in hopefully by the end of the weekend.